spotlight at Vahdat Hall in Tehran does not just illuminate, it isolates. In the winter of 2004, standing center stage, Shirin Yasini was the most visible woman in the Islamic Republic of Iran. To the 4 million people who bought her bootlegged cassettes in the bazaars of Tabriz and Isfahan, she was the nightingale of Persia, a voice that carried the ancient sorrow and enduring hope of a civilization. To the bearded men in the front row, generals of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, and senior clerics, she was a tool, a national asset, a velvet glove over the iron fist of the regime. Shirin possessed a voice that defied politics. It was a contralto of such texture and warmth that it could make a hardened Basij militiaman weep for his mother. The regime, which had banned female soloists after the 1979 revolution, had made a rare, calculated exception for her. She was allowed to sing, provided the audience was segregated or the songs were sufficiently patriotic. They used her to show the world a softer face of the revolution. They paraded her at state dinners and private galas for visiting diplomats. But as Shirin bowed to the applause, a storm of roses raining down from the balconies, her eyes scanned the VIP box. She wasn't looking for adoration. She was looking at General Reza Madani, the head of the IRGC's missile program, who was whispering into the ear of a nuclear physicist named Dr. Ardashir. She memorized the interaction. She noted the tension in Madani's jaw, the way the physicist wiped sweat from his forehead despite the hall's chill. Shirin Yasini was not just a singer. For the past 18 months, she had been the highest-placed intelligence asset Israel had inside the borders of its arch-enemy. She was a woman living 2 lives, separated by the thickness of a stage curtain. One life was defined by adulation, flowers, and the suffocating control of the Ministry of Culture. The other was defined by invisible ink, dead drops in public parks, and the terrifying knowledge that her voice was the only thing keeping her from a hanging crane in Evin prison. This is the story of how the Mossad weaponized fame. It is an operation that does not appear in official histories, a symphony of espionage played in the key of high treason. It began not with a gun, but with a melody. To understand the betrayal, one must understand the cage. In the early 2000s, Shirin lived in a sprawling villa in North Tehran, a relic of the Shah's era, surrounded by high walls and private security provided by the state. It looked like luxury. It felt like a supermax prison. Her passport was held by the Ministry of Intelligence, Vivak. Her driver was an informant. Her maid reported on her phone calls. Shirin had come from a family of poets and musicians who were purged in the early years of the revolution. Her father had died in a prison cell in 1982, accused of monarchist sympathies. She had learned to hide her hatred behind a veil of compliance. She sang their anthems because it was the only way to breathe. But the hatred festered. It grew with every forced smile, every mandated performance for the men who had destroyed her heritage. The turning point came in 2002. The regime needed foreign currency and soft power. They authorized a rare European tour for Shirin, Paris, Berlin, London. It was a charm offensive designed to distract the West from the clandestine centrifuges spinning in Natanz. For Shirin, it was a glimpse of the sun. The security detail for the Paris leg of the tour was heavy. 4 Vivak agents, ostensibly for her protection, actually there to prevent defection. They watched her sleep. They tasted her food. But intelligence agencies know that perfection is impossible. There is always a gap in the armor. In Paris, that gap was a dental emergency. Shirin cracked a molar on a hard piece of bread 2 days before her performance at the Olympia. The pain was excruciating. The Vivak handlers scrambled to find a dentist who would make a house call, but it was Sunday. They were forced to take her to a private clinic in the 16th arrondissement, a clinic recommended by the Iranian embassy. What the embassy did not know, what Vivak did not suspect, was that the clinic's receptionist was a Sayan, a volunteer helper for the Mossad. The clinic was sterile, smelling of clove oil and antiseptic. The Vivak agents swept the room, checked the exits, and stood guard in the hallway. They allowed the dentist, a gray-haired man named Dr. Laurent, to be alone with the patient for the procedure. The door clicked shut, the drill whirred to life, but Dr. Laurent did not start working immediately. He lowered his mask. He looked into Shirin's terrified eyes and spoke in perfect Farsi, with the accent of a Tehrani native. "I am not going to hurt you, Shirin," he whispered, the drill's noise masking his voice from the men outside. "But I have a message from a friend who admired your father. He says, the nightingale can only sing when the cage is open." Shirin froze. That phrase. It was the last line of a poem her father had written in his diary, a diary that had been confiscated by the revolutionary committees 20 years ago. No one else could know it. "Who are you?" she breathed. "We are people who know what you have lost," the doctor said. "We are people who can help you settle the score, not by running away. Anyone can run, but by staying, by fighting." In the 10 minutes that followed, under the guise of a root canal, the recruitment pitch was made. It was not coercive. It was not about money. Mossad psychologists had built a profile of Shirin Yassini that was sharper than a scalpel. They knew she didn't want wealth. She had that. She didn't want safety. She was reckless. She wanted revenge. She wanted to destroy the system that had taken her father and turned her art into propaganda. By the time the VVAC agents banged on the door, demanding to know why it was taking so long, Shirin Yassini had made a choice. She walked out of that clinic with a numb jaw and a new purpose. She was no longer a victim. She was an operative. The training happened in fragments. A shopping trip to Galeries Lafayette, where she slipped into a changing room and met a female handler for 45 seconds. A handshake at a diplomatic reception where a microdot was passed. Mossad tradecraft is often mythologized as high-tech gadgets, but the reality is far more human. It is about psychology and improvisation. They taught her the art of memory, how to remember the faces of generals, the snippets of conversation about shipment dates and enrichment levels. They taught her how to read the room not as a performer, but as a predator. "You are invisible," her handler, a woman known only as Yael, told her during a brief encounter in a chaotic backstage corridor. "They do not see a woman. They see a trophy. They see a singer. They will talk in front of you because they do not believe you understand the language of war. Prove them wrong." Shirin returned to Tehran a week later. The cage was the same, but the bird had changed. She carried with her a compact high-frequency transmitter disguised as a part of her professional makeup kit. A dense foundation compact that, if manipulated correctly, could send short bursts of encrypted text via satellite. The first test came a month later. She was invited to a private garden party at the home of a senior advisor to the supreme leader. The alcohol flowed freely, despite the religious prohibitions. The hypocrisy was thick in the air. As the night wore on, the men grew loose-lipped. Shirin sat quietly, sipping tea, smiling when addressed, her ears tuned to a specific frequency. She heard General Madani bragging about a new shipment of miraging steel tubes acquired through a front company in Malaysia, tubes necessary for advanced centrifuges. That night, locked in her bathroom with the tap running, Shirin Yassini sent her first cable to Tel Aviv. 3 days later, a cargo ship was intercepted in the Indian Ocean. The steel never reached Bandar Abbas. The war had begun. The genius of using Shirin lay in her access. Intelligence officers dream of placing a bug in the room. Shirin was a bug that could think, analyze, and ask follow-up questions. She became the confidant of wives. In the segregated society of the Islamic Republic, the wives of the power elite were a goldmine of information. They complained about their husbands' long hours, their sudden trips to remote facilities in the desert, their stress over the project. At a spa day in North Tehran, the wife of a top procurement officer lamented that her husband was traveling to Vienna again to meet with those greedy Russians. Shirin sympathized, offered a comforting word, and memorized the dates. Mossad surveillance teams in Vienna were waiting when the Iranian delegation arrived. They photographed documents, cloned phones, and mapped the entire illicit financing network. Shirin's fame was her shield. Who would suspect the nation's sweetheart? The VVAC agents assigned to her were more concerned with keeping male fans away than monitoring her for espionage. They saw her as a fragile artist, emotionally volatile, perhaps a bit dim. She played into the stereotype perfectly. She threw tantrums about lighting. She demanded specific flowers. She created a persona of a demanding diva to mask the cold, calculating intellect at work. But the stress was eating her alive. Every transmission was a roll of the dice. Every time she looked a general in the eye and smiled, she felt the ghost of her father watching. She began taking sleeping pills. Her hands shook before performances. The Mossad handlers monitored her psychological state from afar, worried that their star asset was burning out. By 2005, the stakes had escalated. The international community was waking up to the reality of Iran's nuclear program. The Americans were pushing for sanctions. The Israelis were preparing for the possibility of a preemptive strike. They needed granular intelligence. They needed to know not just what was happening, but where and when. Shirin was booked to perform at a gala for the Defenders of the Revolution, an event attended by the inner circle of the military-industrial complex. Her handler sent a high-risk request. "We need the identity of the new head of the weaponization group. We know he is a ghost. Find him." The gala was held in a secure compound. Mobile phones were confiscated. Bodyguards lined the walls. Shirin sang songs of martyrdom and sacrifice, her voice soaring to the rafters. Afterwards, at the reception, she navigated the room like a shark. She found General Madani in a corner, speaking to a man she didn't recognize. The man was nondescript, wearing an ill-fitting suit, looking uncomfortable among the uniformed officers. He had the hands of a scholar, not a soldier. Shirin approached, flashing her famous smile. "General," she purred, "you promised to introduce me to your brilliant friends." Madani, flushed with pride and perhaps a bit of smuggled vodka, laughed. "Shirin, this is Dr. Mohseni, the man who is going to give us the sun." The man who is going to give us the sun. The metaphor was clear. Nuclear fusion, the power of stars. Shirin charmed Dr. Mohseni. She asked innocent questions about his work. He was flattered. He was unused to attention from women like her. He let slip that he worked at a facility near Qom, buried deep under a mountain, a facility the West didn't know existed. That night, Shirin transmitted the name, Mohseni. It was the key that unlocked a massive intelligence puzzle. The intelligence Shirin provided led to a series of inexplicable accidents in the Iranian nuclear program. Centrifuges crashed, power supplies exploded, scientists vanished or defected. The Stuxnet virus was still years away, but the groundwork for the sabotage campaign was being laid, brick, by the singer in the gilded cage. But paranoia in Tehran was rising. The counterintelligence directorate of VIVAC, Unit 8200, knew there was a leak at the highest levels. They swept offices for bugs. They interrogated secretaries. They never suspected the singer, but they began to tighten the circle around the elite. Shirin felt the noose tightening. Her driver was replaced by a sullen, silent man with dead eyes. Her phone line clicked with static. She realized she was being watched not just as a celebrity, but as a person of interest. She signaled her handlers, "It's getting too hot. I need to get out." The response was cold, calculated. Not yet. One last mission, the biggest one. They wanted her to deploy a digital payload, a thumb drive. She was to insert it into the laptop of a specific official during a private concert at his home. It was madness. It was suicide. But they told her that this drive contained a worm that would map the entire internal network of the nuclear program. It was the golden gun. Shirin refused. Then they sent her a photo. It was a picture of her younger sister, who lived in Canada, a photo taken from across the street. The message was implicit. We can reach anyone. Do the job. It was a betrayal by her own side. Mossad was squeezing her, using the same tactics the regime used. Shirin realized then that in the game of nations, there are no good guys. There are only players and pawns. The target was the Minister of Intelligence himself, a man feared by everyone in Iran, a man with blood on his hands up to his elbows. Shirin was summoned to his private residence in the Alborz Mountains for a Nowruz, New Year, celebration. She arrived with her instruments and her terror. The security search was invasive. They checked her microphone stand. They opened her makeup case. They missed the thumb drive, which was sewn into the hem of her heavy velvet dress. The performance was intimate. Just the minister, his family, and a few aides. The minister's laptop sat on a desk in the corner of the room, connected to the secure intranet. During a break, while the guests were eating, Shirin asked to use the bathroom. She knew the layout. She had studied the blueprints Mossad provided. She slipped down the hallway. The study door was ajar. There was a guard, but he was distracted, watching a football match on a small TV in the anteroom. Shirin moved like a ghost. She entered the study. Her hands were trembling so violently she almost dropped the drive. She found the USB port. She inserted it. The screen flickered. A small progress bar appeared. Uploading. 20%. 50%. She heard footsteps in the hall. The guard was moving. 80%. Kanom Yassini? The voice was right behind her. Shirin spun around, her body blocking the laptop. It was the minister's young daughter, holding a doll. I was looking for the washroom, Shirin stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. It's the other way, the girl said, pointing. Thank you, Azizam. Shirin smiled, a rictus of panic. She glanced back. The screen was dark. The upload was complete. She snatched the drive, hid it in her palm, and walked out, her legs feeling like water. The data from the thumb drive was a treasure trove. It set the Iranian program back by years, but the operation left a digital footprint. VVAC analysts found traces of the intrusion. They traced the timeline. They realized the breach happened during the private recital. The circle of suspects was small. The minister, his aides, the catering staff, and the singer. Shirin didn't know she was burned until she saw the black Peugeot 405 parked outside her villa, the engine idling. It wasn't her usual detail. These were the wolves. She triggered her emergency signal, code black, extraction immediate. But extraction from Tehran is not like the movies. You don't just call a helicopter. It requires a pipeline, safe houses, smugglers, mountain passes. Mossad activated the Esther protocol. A network of dormant assets was woken up to save the Nightingale. A taxi driver, a rug merchant, a Kurdish smuggler. Shirin grabbed a bag she had packed months ago. Cash, gold coins, warm clothes. She didn't say goodbye to her house, her piano, or her life. She walked out the back service entrance, wearing a chador, and climbed into a waiting battered Pekin sedan. The drive to the Turkish border is long and treacherous, 800 kilometers of mountains, checkpoints, and desert. The regime had alerted the border guards. Stop Shirin Yassini, use lethal force if necessary. They knew she was running. Her face was on every television screen within hours. National treasure kidnapped by Zionists, the headlines screamed. They couldn't admit she was a spy. It would be too humiliating. So they spun a narrative of abduction. Shirin spent 3 days in the trunk of a car, breathing through a rusty hole. She spent 2 nights in a shepherd's hut in the Zagros Mountains, shivering as helicopters swept the valleys with searchlights. She was stripped of her glamour. The diva was gone. There was only a frightened woman, dirty, hungry, surviving on adrenaline and hatred. The Kurdish smugglers, paid handsomely by Mossad intermediaries, moved her through the smuggler's path, steep, narrow trails used to move alcohol and cigarettes. They rode on mules navigating minefields left over from the Iran-Iraq War. At the border crossing near Bazargan, the IRGC had set up a blockade. They were checking every vehicle, every face. The smugglers halted. We can't go through, the leader said. We have to go over. Over meant the high peaks, snow-covered, oxygen-thin, deadly. They climbed at night. The wind howled like a banshee. Shirin's lungs burned. She was a singer, not a mountaineer. Her boots were falling apart, but she kept moving. She thought of her father. She thought of the minister's daughter. She thought of the lies she had told and the truths she had stolen. Near the summit, a patrol spotted them. Gunfire erupted. Tracers slashed the darkness. One of the smugglers fell, screaming. Shirin threw herself behind a rock. Bullets chipped the stone inches from her face. Go! The smuggler leader shouted, returning fire with an AK-47. Run to the lights! That is Turkey! Shirin ran. She scrambled over ice and shale, sliding, falling, getting up. The border was just a line on a map, but in that moment, it was the difference between life and death. She crossed into Turkish territory as dawn broke. A white Land Rover was waiting on a dirt road. 2 men got out. They didn't look like smugglers. They looked like Israelis. "Shirin," one of them said in Hebrew-accented English, "welcome home." She collapsed into the snow, not weeping, but laughing, a hysterical broken sound that echoed in the empty mountains. Shirin Yassini disappeared from the world. The official Iranian story was that she had died in a car accident while being kidnapped by foreign agents. They held a state funeral for an empty coffin. They named a street after her. In reality, she was debriefed in a safe house in Tel Aviv for 6 months. She gave them everything. Every name, every location, every psychological weakness of the men who ruled Iran. Her intelligence was the foundation of Israel's strategy against Iran for the next decade. But the cost was absolute. She lived under a new identity in a small town in the Negev desert. She underwent plastic surgery to change the face that millions loved. She learned Hebrew. She worked in a library, shelving books in silence. She never sang again, not professionally. The voice that had captivated a nation was silenced by the secrets it had carried. Years later, in 2010, the Stuxnet virus decimated the Iranian centrifuges at Natanz. General Madani was fired in disgrace. The nuclear program was stalled. Shirin watched the news on a small TV in her apartment. She saw the faces of the men she had betrayed. She saw the confusion and fear in their eyes. She poured herself a glass of tea, sat by the window, and looked out at the desert sunset. She whispered a single note, a low, mournful hum. It was the opening note of Morgi Sahar, Bird of Dawn, the anthem of resistance. She had lost her country. She had lost her name. She had lost her voice. But she had won. The story of Shirin Yassini is a reminder that the most effective weapons in modern warfare are not missiles or drones. They are people. People pushed to the breaking point. People who turn their pain into a blade. Mossad turned a singer into a spy, but it was the regime that turned her into an enemy. They built the cage, and they were surprised when the bird tore it down. Intelligence agencies often talk about assets and resources, but Shirin Yassini was a human being who made an impossible choice. She traded her applause for silence, her fame for freedom. Today, somewhere in the world, there is a woman with a different face and a quiet life. No one knows that the librarian with the sad eyes once held the nuclear secrets of a nation in the hem of her dress. No one knows that she is the nightingale who flew through the fire. But the files in the archives of Tel Aviv remember. And now, so do you. The narrative continues, delving deeper into the psychological fallout. The silence of the Negev was a stark contrast to the cacophony of Tehran. For the first year, Shirin, now known as Sarah, struggled to differentiate between peace and emptiness. The adrenaline of the double life had been a drug. Without the constant fear of discovery, without the high-stakes game of cat and mouse, she felt hollow. Mossad provided her with psychological support, but how does one treat the trauma of losing an entire identity? The doctor spoke of PTSD, of adjustment disorders, but Shirin knew it was something more profound. It was a soul amputation. She began to have nightmares, not of the mountains or the Vivac agents, but of the applause. The sound of thousands of hands clapping would morph into the sound of gunfire. The roses thrown on stage would turn into drops of blood. Her handler, Yael, visited her occasionally. These visits were complicated. Yael was the only link to her past, the only person who knew the truth. But Yael was also the architect of her destruction. Was it worth it? Shirin asked one evening, as the desert wind rattled the window frames. Yael didn't answer immediately. She looked at the woman who had once been a queen and was now a ghost. You saved lives, Shirin. Maybe thousands, maybe millions. Does that make it worth it? Only you can answer that. In 2012, a ripple of danger disturbed the quiet life in the Negev. Israeli counterintelligence intercepted chatter from a Hezbollah cell operating in South America. They were looking for a traitor artist. The Iranians hadn't fully bought the death story. Someone in Vivac had connected the dots. They were hunting. Shirin was moved again, this time to a secure apartment in Haifa. Her security protocols were tightened. She was told not to speak Farsi in public, not to visit Iranian restaurants, to erase herself even further. The fear returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't the fear of capture. It was the fear of being forgotten. The regime was rewriting history. They were erasing her recordings, banning her songs, scrubbing her name from the cultural archives. They were killing her legacy. This angered Shirin more than the death threats. They could take her life, but they couldn't take her art. She began to write again. Not songs for performance, but a memoir. A secret history of the revolution written in code, hidden in the margins of Hebrew books. In Haifa, Shirin met an elderly man named Eli. He was an Iraqi Jew who had fled Baghdad in the 1950s. He ran a small shop repairing musical instruments. Shirin wandered in one day, drawn by the sight of an oud hanging in the window. Eli recognized something in her. Not her face, but her hands. The way she touched the wood of the instrument. They began to talk. He spoke of the Tigris. She spoke of the Albors. They spoke the language of exiles, a mixture of nostalgia and bitterness. One day, Eli handed her the oud. "Play," he said. Shirin hesitated. She hadn't played in years. Her fingers were stiff. But as she plucked the strings, the muscle memory returned. She played a folk melody, simple and haunting. Eli closed his eyes. "You have a story in your fingers," he said. "A sad story. A story that cannot be told," she replied. "Those are the only stories worth playing," Eli said. For the first time since crossing the mountains, Shirin felt a spark of connection. She wasn't alone. She was part of a tribe of the displaced, the people who carry their homelands in their hearts because they are forbidden from walking on the soil. In 2015, during the height of the nuclear negotiations, a mysterious audio file began circulating on the Iranian internet. It was a recording of Morgi Sahar, but sung with a raw, aged voice, accompanied by a single oud. It went viral on Telegram and WhatsApp. The youth of Iran, who were protesting in the streets, adopted it as their anthem. They didn't know who the singer was, but the older generation recognized the timbre. "It sounds like her," they whispered. "It sounds like the nightingale." Shirin had recorded it in Eli's back room. She had encrypted the file and routed it through servers in 3 continents before leaking it. It was her message to her people. "I am still here. I am still watching. Do not give up." Vivek tried to block the file. They arrested people for sharing it. But you cannot arrest a melody. The song floated through the streets of Tehran, a ghost haunting the regime that tried to silence it. Shirin Yassini is now an old woman. She lives quietly, watching the news from the Middle East with the detached eye of an analyst. She sees the protests, the crackdowns, the endless cycle of violence. She knows her role in history will likely never be officially acknowledged. The Mossad files will remain sealed for 50 years, perhaps forever. To the world, she is a tragic figure who died too young. To intelligence historians, she is a case study in successful recruitment. But to herself, she is simply a survivor. She sits on her balcony in Haifa, looking out at the Mediterranean Sea. She thinks of the Caspian. She thinks of the snow on Damavand. She realizes that she was never really a weapon. A weapon is an object. She was a catalyst. She accelerated the decay of a corrupt system. She used the only power she had, her proximity, her eyes, her ears, to strike a blow against tyranny. We often think of spies as James Bond figures, invincible, detached, living in a world of glamour. But the reality of espionage is closer to Shirin's story. It is a world of lonely people making terrible choices in dark rooms. It is a world where victory looks a lot like loss. Shirin Yassini helped delay an Iranian nuclear bomb. She saved lives, but she paid for it with her existence. As the sun sets over the sea, she hums a quiet melody. It is not a song of war. It is a lullaby. A lullaby for the woman she used to be, and for the country she can never go back to. The operation is over, the asset is retired. But the music never truly stops.